Evening, good afternoon. The hour is upon us. This is a special workshop meeting of the Alameda County Water District Board of Directors. Secretary, please call the roll.
Directors Gunther,
Here.
Akbari,
Here.
Huang, here, Weed,
Here.
and Sethy.
Yeah, we expect President Sethy to join in a few minutes.
The record show Director Sethy will be attending this afternoon in virtual. And he is online already. We have, as far as I know, no attendees as of the moment.
Correct. No members of the public in attendance at the moment. Our next item would be salute to the flag.
Hey, well, good evening. We'll stand. I'll lead our students. Pledge allegiance. Flag of the United States of America. I believe public comments for anything that is on the agenda for this evening's meeting or this afternoon's meeting. We have no public in attendance.
You know, even though we don't have public in attendance, Vice President Gunther, I think, we just had a member of the public just join now. So if it's okay, I'll go ahead and do some very quick housekeeping remarks so everybody knows how to participate. Good afternoon. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome the public's participation in this special meeting of the ACWD Board. My name is Ed Stevenson and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this board meeting in person or remotely by either using the Zoom application or by telephone. Any member of the public participating in person may approach the speaker's podium at the appropriate time. For those participating remotely, note that the meeting agenda and presentation materials are available on the district's website at acwd.org. You may reference the instructions at the top of the agenda for how to participate using the controls in the Zoom app or your dial pad if participating by telephone audio. This hybrid board meeting is being recorded and will be made available to the public for future viewing. And that concludes my housekeeping remarks. We might want to just double check if there are any comments on matters on the agenda.
So again, we'll go ahead. We have Mr. Kelly A. Kelly, if you'd like to make any comments on it, or certainly can during it.
And I see he's got his hands up.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Thanks. So this thing, I'm looking at the semi-tropic agreement in generally speaking, and I'll make a lot of remarks about it. Like, for example, there was 106,000 acre feet stored there recently. And then my question would be, is that really the amount that you can get back, or is some of it's going to get lost along the way due to whatever reasons, and you're only going to get some 90 or 95% or 80% or whatever, some fraction of that actually delivered once you finish paying off all the overheads. And then wanted to also compare and contrast this semi-tropic, 100,000 acre feet sounds like a lot. It's like enormous, but if there was a big earthquake or something, or a flood or whatever, and some of these facilities got damaged, basically all the retrievals, all the deliveries rely on the State Water Project, the South Bay Aqueduct for delivering, I think. So is that the case, or maybe you could feed some through the what is it, it starts with a Q, the one over there in Contra Costa County, that new dam that they're thinking of building. Would that help with providing an alternate pipeline, an alternate routing? And then also, if you compare this idea of storage offsite with a local storage, let's say Del Val. Let's imagine that Del Val were full, and let's imagine that you then said, okay, I need a lot of water and I need it now. The semi-tropic, 100,000 acre feet sounds like a lot, but there's nothing, or there's very little here in these papers about the delivery rate. So if they're able to deliver at the rate of a small amount per year, that's a very low rate. There are physical and legal limitations on how much you can get out of that ground, out of the semi-tropic, and how much you can get it delivered. And that restricts it a lot as compared to, let's say, Del Val, where if you were to say, I want a lot of water and I want it now, and there was an earthquake, the Del Val would probably still be working because it's a lot closer. And you can turn on the pipes really, or turn on the spigots and get a very high flow rate and get a lot of water, maybe a lot faster and a lot more reliable. So, you know, I think the limitations of the semi-tropic are not really obvious in this contract, but there's a lot of limitations on these things. And that's why everybody's got to put a lot of work into, local storage and getting, dry years and all these things, because you can never have too much reliability. And, the reliability issue and the delivery rate issue is always a problem. Thanks.
Mr. Brew, if I might, one potential clarification. The water at Semi-Tropic is located in a groundwater basin south of Bakersfield in Kern County. That water will be pumped out and put into the State Water Project, the California Aqueduct, and sent to Southern California. In return, we will get exchange water from water that is to the north of us, part of the state water system. So it is a water trade, and we have the rights to trade up to in excess of 100,000 acre feet.
Yeah, and as we go through the item, we can probably address a few of those issues. I do see that President Sethy, and just for the record, I have him joining at around 4:04. But President Sethy is online with us right now and has his hand up.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry I joined late. I was on a business call here, but I just wanted to report that our director of HR informed me earlier today that I was exposed to somebody with COVID-19, and I'm going to go for tests tomorrow at Kaiser. I'm the caretaker for an 87-year-old mother who has gone through 3 years of cancer and recovering. And so I don't want to impair anybody in my immediate family or otherwise. That's why I'm not attending the meeting tonight. I was going to ask Director Gunther, as Vice President of the Board, if he could lead and manage this meeting. I can see the ACWD boardroom, but I don't know who is in attendance from our board. If the general manager can inform me of that, then I will just kindly follow along.
Of course, not a problem. We have the rest of your colleagues, Directors Weed, Huang, Akbari, and Gunther are here, and our full complement of staff is here as well.
And Director Sethy, this is Director Gunther. I'll certainly take over for you this evening as necessary.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and appreciate all the board members for this presentation tonight. I will have some comments at the end of the staff presentation. So thank you very much.
Okay.
So I do have a question for staff. So is screen sharing on? Because
Yeah,
we
working
are
on it
not
right
seeing
now.
it. Okay.
In the meantime, we'll have all the presentation materials on the screen for you, and we'll see if we can get the media player working.
Okay, so it's just localized, but our Mr. Brewer
Yeah.
and Director Sethy.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, everybody can
perfect.
see this.
Thank you.
What you're
Okay.
seeing on the screen is what they can see.
Okay, as long as staff is ready, then I would say let's go ahead with item number 4.
Okay, and this is a resolution authorizing the general manager to enter into an agreement among the Department of Water Resources, the State of California, Alameda County Water District, and Kern County Water Agency for storage of a portion of Alameda County Water District state water project supplies in the semi-tropic Water Storage District and determining actions are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. It's a mouthful, but to walk us through this item, I'll turn it over to our Director of Water Resources, Ms. Heides.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. The California Department of Water Resources, or DWR, requires an agreement for the delivery of district water supplies to the Semi-Tropic Groundwater Banking and Exchange Program. The agreement, called Agreement among the Department of Water Resources of the State of California, Alameda County Water District, and Kern County Water Agency for storage of a portion of Alameda County Water District State Water Project water supplies in Semi-Tropic Water Storage District, also known as agreement in this report, requires approval by DWR, Kern County Water Agency, who is the regional water wholesaler for Semi-Tropic Water Storage District, and the district ourselves. Under the existing point of delivery agreement, or POD, as we refer to it, the provision allowing the district to deliver new water to the Semi-Tropic Water Storage District expired at the end of 2020. The new agreement, covering delivery through 2030 and recovery through 2035, has been negotiated and reviewed by district staff and general counsel and is now ready for execution. The district must also file a notice of exemption for the agreement under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. This item, at the time of writing of the report, was scheduled to be reviewed with the Water Resources and Conservation Committee on February 22nd, 2023, which we did yesterday. Board approval of this action will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 2.2, protect existing imported water supplies. So tonight's recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution 1, authorizing the general manager to enter into an agreement among the Department of Water Resources of the State of California, Alameda County Water District, and Kern County Water Agency for storage of a portion of Alameda County Water District's State Water Project water supplies in Semi-Tropic Water Storage District, and 2, determining the actions are exempt from CEQA. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, it's my understanding that if for some reason Semi-Tropic is not able to provide water into the state water system or find a buyer for it, that they through for some reason we cannot utilize their groundwater reservoir, that they will find at their sole cost alternative water supplies somewhere else in the state for ACWD. Is that correct?
Director Reed, that's a good question. I think you might be referring to something in the contract that's sort of a, if they cannot serve, that they would find an alternative clause, but that's not something that we typically would expect to exercise. The program has performed well, even exceeded our expectations. So to date, it's been a very successful program.
Okay. As of now, Semi-Tropic does not have an approved Sigma plan. They're still under review by the state of California. And that could be one of the contingencies issues here that might come into play that might limit them. Also, there are issues of water quality within the Semi-Tropic basin. So the point is that if Semi-Tropic is not able, my understanding is, and hopefully get clarification, if not now, in the near future, that Semi-Tropic is under contractual requirements to if they can't provide the water that's being stored, returned to us, they will find the water from another source at their sole cost.
I believe you're correct about the replacement water, but I would just note that they are awaiting a response from the state on their Sigma plan. But they also, as we talked about in committee briefly, the water that we send down to them stays in their basin. About 10% of what we send down there stays in their basin, but the other water that we expect to get back, they do not include in their sustainable management. That's sort of over and above what they have planned for in Sigma.
Okay, but again, we Zone 7 Valley Water District and ACWD are the major contributors to and participants in the Semi-Tropic Groundwater Bank. And it's my understanding that all three of us have that same agreement, that if they are not able to execute their end of the deal for whatever reason, that they will make us whole by finding other alternate water supplies.
That's a good question, and I will double check that part of the agreement, Director Weed, and get back to you. I'm not sure if the others have a provision I can't really speak to that.
Valley Water District made that argument when they were questioning, they had concerns about the water quality and a Sigma provision that called for overdrafts till their proposal to continue their overdrafting till 2040.
It looks like General Counsel has
Yeah.
something to interject.
Again, I don't know the answer to the question either, but I believe that the answer to that question will be in a separate agreement that's not this agreement that's before you tonight. I think that's going to be in the agreements between ACWD and Semi-Tropic. The agreement that's before you tonight is an agreement between DWR, Kern County, and Alameda County Water District for how water is delivered. But your question is, I think, specific to the Semi-Tropic agreement. We can look into that.
Right, but the rationale for making with this agreement is that we'll get a benefit at the end, one way or the other if we park it there. And that was part of the sales pitch when we gave them. The second point I'd make is that we're spending about $30 million for 100,000 acre feet of storage. It comes out to less than $300,000 per acre foot of storage. When we look at dams as an alternative, and this I believe is an alternative to dams, whether it be sites or Los Vaqueros, the cost there ranges from $10 million to $20 million per 1,000 acre feet of storage. So this storage is coming in at less than 3% of the cost of the other initiatives that we're working on, including Los Vaqueros. And I support the use of semi-tropic, but I encourage us to be on top of the whatever legal liabilities or restrictions there are. And in that case, have a clear understanding of what role the Met has in being in their ability to determine whether or not they will accept the transfer, because they're the only contractor really large enough to accept the large amounts of water that we're talking about shifting to them. And if they have water quality concerns, is that a potential risk to this contract? I've been told in the past when I raised the issue, not to worry, we have a contractual requirement on semi-tropic that they'll find the water for us wherever. So, thank you.
If I may.
Okay, go ahead, Director Huang.
So my understanding is the item before us is specific to the agreement with DWR and other parties to move the water to and from semi-tropic.
Correct.
And I did have the pleasure of hearing this item in committee yesterday. My understanding is that this new agreement would actually provide ACWD with more flexibility in terms of how we manage water. So overall, this is actually a pretty good deal for us. There are actually new intangibles such as the new water. We could potentially sell this water if we have access. Those are different abilities that we didn't used to have. So overall, I do support this project. I'm actually really happy that staff is pushing this along. Finally, we're getting certain things that we used to kind of just do it on exemption basis. Now all these processes are formalized. So thank you.
I'd make one more point. Something else was brought on in committee, which Judy and I serve on yesterday, is that we've established some additional flexibility to be able to store water at San Luis Reservoir. And in this exchange world, that may not be the same water talk we're talking about. It's not, because Kern County is much farther south in the system. So this exchange program has become more complex and greater security. And thank you.
Yeah, a key provision here with this agreement, and the reason why we're bringing it to the board in a sort of an off meeting schedule. This is a special workshop really dedicated to our emergency preparedness and response program, but we're bringing this as an action item here because it's key from a timing standpoint. We do have a fair amount of water right now stored in San Luis Reservoir. And what these provisions in this agreement do, one of the key things is it allows us to transfer that water out and essentially move it into semi-tropic. And so by doing that, we get to keep possession of that water, even if San Luis fills and there would be technically a paper spill at San Luis, in which case we could potentially lose some water. So this helps us to save that water. So it's a key provision. We're glad we're getting it taken care of. And I do see a hand up by President Sethy.
Yes. So I took the southern route to Yosemite after the February 9th board meeting. and saw San Luis. I stopped there at the reservoir. And so it looked like it was around 75% capacity at the time that I was there, which was good. But I would like to follow up with Director Huang's comments about the sale of water from our occupancy at Semi-Tropic. Last I saw, we had about 140,000 acre feet, which is about a 4-year supply for ACWD, our community. So first of all, let me ask my questions, and then you can give your responses. So first of all, what is the opportunity for sale of water? And at what price can we sell that water? And what is the cost basis for that water that we're selling? And number two, I would like to hear the feedback of Director Gunther and Director Akbari as to what their feelings are about this item too. Thank you.
So I think there was a question in there about the sale of the semi-tropic water. So right now, this agreement, we're not proposing to sell any water through this agreement. We are at this point proposing simply to be able to deliver water down there for additional storage. And as Mr. Stevenson mentioned, this year it's going to allow us to move water from the San Luis Reservoir back down to the storage, to be able to save it for additional drought supply. And as far as on the whole, our semi-tropic storage bank, being able to sell that's something, some creative ideas have been thought about. Right now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we delve into that simply because we're coming off of a big drought, and that would be sort of a bigger effort to consider our long-term needs and how much of that supply we may need.
If I may clarify my comment, I think
Sure.
I have no intention to imply that we're ready and willing to sell the water right now. But I think the ability to sell surplus water is something that this board has kicked around as something that we would like that flexibility. When and where and if we pull the trigger, it really will depend on site-specific conditions, how much water we have. The flexibility of this new contract that's being proposed, agreement that's being proposed, is basically just give us that ability. That doesn't mean we have to do it.
Correct.
Comments following on that. My understanding is that our IRP suggests that there's approximately 10,000 acre foot per year potential for contingency water supplies at a semi-tropic if we go into an extended drought. And it was noted at one of the meetings that we had at semi-tropic at that time 120,000 acre feet or a 12-year reserve for a drought contingency. So we were, in that sense, we were in very good stead, and we may well have more water than is needed to meet our even long-term needs. So thank you.
Okay, Director Akbari.
Yeah, I didn't really plan on making too many comments on this item. I think I would echo the sentiments of Director Huang that I think it just formalizes the ability to give us that flexibility if we want to store or sell additional water. So I was going to be supportive of the staff recommendation.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, I just got a few.
I was asking about the potential sale of water. That's where I wanted feedback from the other board members.
Well, I think at this point, the concept, for my opinion anyway, this is not really part of the item. It's having an ability perhaps to do that, but we're certainly not discussing sailing at this point.
If I could jump in.
Yeah.
If this helps provide some context, this agreement is actually a renewal of an agreement that's expired. And it does allow for the movement of water to and from semi-tropic. That's really the focus of this agreement. There's been some modifications to this one from the prior agreement that adds some flexibility. But it's not about the sale of water. It's not about semi-tropic water quality. Again, I think those are things that we would need to look at in the context of the semi-tropic agreement, but not this. If it helps provide you, the old version of this agreement was called the point of delivery agreement. And we kind of took that out because they've changed the title this year. And it's a 10-year agreement that allows for the movement of water. So just for additional context.
Yes.
Sethy, does that answer?
So I don't need to belabor the issue, but what I'm asking the other directors for feedback on is we have quite a volume of water stored in semi-tropic. As Director Weed was saying, 12 years. If you equated it to our immediate needs, it's 4 years of water. And we have the ability to transfer water. We were limited during the last drought, not the most recent one, when we were down to zero allocation from the State Water Project with Oroville, where we could not transfer any water. And yet we had the ability to sell water to Southern California from our groundwater basin at a premium of around $3,000 per acre foot. And that's where my comments are directed. Do we have the ability to sell excess quantities of water from semi-tropic further south, especially during drought years? And as far as I understand right now from Mr. Miyake, this is not part of what we are entertaining tonight, but I would ask that the staff consider those opportunities where we can generate some extra revenue for the district based on our, I would call it excessive water storage down in Kern County. I'll limit my comments to that. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to support Director Sethy's comments and note that in my mind, Sigma offers the basis for a water market, a viable water market, both to the urban as well as the agricultural users. In the last major drought, you have hardened demand with orchards. And on the auction, agricultural interests were willing to pay up to $2,000 an acre foot to save their orchards. Now, it wasn't a long-term agreement, but it was a spot market. But that extraordinary water potential and economic potential to the district exists. And it's something we should certainly keep in mind as we go forward with these type of approvals. And don't lose sight of the fact that this is a major economic opportunity for the district.
Well, I'd have to disagree at the moment because that's not part of what we're discussing this evening. This is the point of delivery, which would perhaps give us a means to do that. Now, my opinion on that would depend on the situation. And we can't make that choice right now. I can't even make a comment on that because I don't know what our situation would be in. What I would like to comment though is when we first went into this whole program here, I was for it completely. I still am. The fact that we had a situation one year where it looked like we couldn't deliver because we were getting zero, I actually thought about that. What happens if we get zero? Well, if we get zero, we get zero. We can't implement it, but we've been very successful at implementing the project. This is the key element to do it for point of delivery. With that, I think we can move forward. I don't think there's any more questions regarding point of delivery, other than the fact that if we wanted to have that ability, I believe we have that ability to utilize this agreement to perhaps make something like that happen.
If I can interject and I would suggest that we go back to this delivery agreement. And I think we have a member of the public that may wish to comment.
Well, let me make one quick comment because it's important educational basis of the district and its operation. The zero delivery issue has been partially addressed, in great part addressed, with our ability now to store water and bank it at San Luis. and use that semi-tropic and when we had expected drought coming up. In the history of ACWD and the State Water Project, there was 4 months that we truly had a drought. And that's when we went to 0% and we lost the ability to do those water transfers. That's been modified in great part. So yes, it just highlights the value of the ability and the marketability of water, which is really the saving grace for all districts, including droughts, that once we can market the water, we as urban users don't have a problem. The ag then has the issue to address.
Yeah, and if I just could mention, so as Ms. Heides pointed out, this agreement doesn't involve an actual sale or transfer of water. It opens up some possibilities. There's the management tools that are included in the agreement that provide for more flexibility. However, I have heard that there is interest in understanding, okay, well, what are those opportunities? And what can we do specifically? And, for that, I note that we have a couple of IRP workshops coming up where we'll be talking about a number of water resources related topics. And certainly, if this board has an objective of trying to leverage stored water for different reasons, well, that's certainly an appropriate topic to talk about at that time. And we can address that further during a workshop.
I think that would be of benefit.
At the risk of beating the horse. Irvine Ranch at one point bought some land to annex into semi-tropic and bowed out when they saw the practice of overdrafting. They followed up with purchasing of large portions of land in the San Joaquin Valley that they could go turn fallow, and they had complete control over the water resources there. They're doing some very beneficial trades for their district. I suggest that the future of water in the valley, the land ownership in the San Joaquin Valley, will be somewhat analogous to what happened some years ago when the oil companies, 10 oil companies, owned the bulk of the land in the valley, huge tracts. In the future, I see water districts, including ACWD, owning large tracts of land, farmland, in the San Joaquin Valley that are not orchard land, where the demand is hardened, so that we could have the full control of turning them fallow and be able to get access to the groundwater basin. That's where this is going.
I think
but we're
that's a
not there
comment
yet
for a
with this,
future meeting, Director
I-
Weed.
Action.
That
Can I
is not on the
request-
agenda tonight.
Yep, let's bring it back to the agenda, and I am actually curious.
I'd like to move the staff recommend, have somebody, we have a
I'm
motion.
curious to hear do we have a customer comments?
Mr. Kelly, do you have a comment on this? Your hand's not up yet. There it goes.
Yeah, well, I kind of like this idea. I love this idea of going and doing, basically you take the water and you sell it and you get cash. And then later on, you might replace that water, hopefully at a cheaper price. And then you're basically doing water arbitrage, not arbitrage, water trading. You're running a water market, you're storing it, you're selling it, blah, blah, blah. Arbitrage would be if you could do it simultaneously at the same time, sell it with one hand and buy it with the other. But in this case, my suggestion would be, figure out what other water agencies are doing with are they doing this kind of Wild West gambling, water selling and buying and trading and letting their staff go wild with 100% of their stored water, all 100,000 acres? Or are they limiting it to, half or 10% or 5% or whatever? Pick a number and then let them go at it. And if they start losing money on these deals, then of course you'd want to cut it off or whatever. But I think it's fascinating. And I think there could be a lot. There are two things that water agencies need. One is water. Another one is money. And if you could make money this way, then later on you can convert the money into water. That's my opinion.
Okay, well, that we got a little bit off topic. I'd like to bring us back. Are there any more comments on the item that we have before us this evening? Okay, hearing none,
Can I move staff recommendation?
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have a
because-
second from Director Weed. And we'll discuss the other items in a future meeting. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Akbari,
Aye.
Huang,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Sethy.
Aye.
Moving on then to item number 5, the emergency preparedness workshop.
That's right. So this is our marquee item for this afternoon. And this will be the second of 2 workshops that have been focused on the district's emergency preparedness and planning and our approach there. Staff will review the outcome and some information from our first workshop and then talk about our draft work plan for the program moving forward that's intended to increase the district's emergency preparedness. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our Director of Operations and Maintenance, Mr. Ahrens, to get us started.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Yeah, nothing really more to add. This is a follow-up to our first workshop that was back in April of last year. Jake's been busy taking that information and putting a plan together. So with that, I hand over to Jake. And again, hopefully we can hold initial comments until we get through. The goal tonight is really to do some review and then present a proposed work plan for the upcoming few years, and then get any feedback and direction related to that work plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jake Reed, our Security Emergency Services Manager.
And as Jake gets started, I just want to circle back with the board and let you know that the screen you're normally used to looking at isn't going to work for us today. So our apologies there. And it's really only for the board and staff, for the members of the public that are participating. Board and staff have a separate little viewer that they can kind of see the screen content a little bit more closely. So my apologies, but you'll have to stare at the overhead screens to see the information being presented this evening. My apologies. Yeah, that's right. Got to go back to the old days. All right, Jake, sorry about that.
It's fine. All right, thanks, Ed. Thanks, Kurt. I believe everybody knows me. Kelly does too by now. But if not, my name is Jake Reed, as Kurt said, Supervisor Emergency and Security Services. So all involved with emergency preparedness. The agenda here, that way. In summary, it's basically 3-part. A review of the approach to my program, a review of the last workshop, which was mid last year. Some of us weren't able to attend, and some of us, including myself, had to shake off a few cobwebs. So we'll do a quick review of the last workshop. And then to the bulk of the workshop today, why we're here, the recommended work plan and followed up discussion. This is the purpose of, again, for today. So the emergency preparedness program, I lead the program. It's a district-wide program, and I'm housed in operations and maintenance. When you talk about disasters, if one were to happen today, it affects everything, right? So what we do daily, especially if it's a large-scale disaster, affects everything. So that's why when it comes to preparing, we talk about staff, infrastructure, procedures, and training. Strategy with the program, how we prepare as a district. In many ways, daily, we respond to emergencies and refine how we do that. Those are what I call small to medium scale emergencies. Then we have larger scale emergencies. So overall, my program really, the main bulk of it and the district-wide program as a whole is for those at the second bullet here, a lower likelihood, higher risk emergencies, right? Cyber attack, the earthquake on the 7.0 earthquake on the Hayward Fault. Those earthquakes those scenarios that could potentially put us out of business. And we'll talk about this a few times. I get my coordination here. The key objective when we talk about large scale emergencies and key objective of the work plan is first 72 hours. So before I move too much further, I thought it would be review a few terms. We all have our own discipline here at the district and at your own particular jobs outside of the district. And so, language, just figured to review the language a little bit so you guys know the language I'm speaking. Everything's based off of our mission statement, right? So again, just a quick review of our mission statement to provide a reliable supply of high quality water at a reasonable price to our customers. When we talk about a little bit, I'll talk about business continuity. Our business is our mission statement. All the functions that allow us to stay in business and the related staff from those functions, that is business continuity. So when we talk about our mission statement and how we stay in business, there are threats, right? Threats synonymous with disaster, with emergency. In my world, we just call it threats. There's basically three different categories. There's malevolent, which is man-made, natural, and then there's dependencies, which we were just talking about before I stood up here.
Do you wish us to make comments during your presentation or wait until you finish?
It would be nice to wait till the discussion
I'll wait
period,
for the
but
end.
now if something comes up, I get it.
No, it's all right.
I'm
I'll
definitely
wait for the
guilty
end.
as that too when a
I'll
thought
make
triggers.
Make my notes as we go along.
Okay. And then resiliency. So again, the district-wide program is to make sure we're resilient to any threat that may interrupt our business. We talk about resiliency. That word basically boils down to the emergency response and the business continuity after an incident. So this is a graph that just kind of sums up an incident, if you will. Left. I'll move this over here. There we go. From left to right, 0 hour of the incident. Recovery means everything's back the way it was before the incident, right? What facilitates responding to a large scale incident? The incident command system, right? System in place that allows for emergency response, which is responding to life safety issues, and then business continuity, which is getting the functions back online. For an example, I can actually use a just recent event, right? The atmospheric river storms that came through January. Before it started, Laura's wire controllers prepared by valving off everything they could in the creek to minimize the impact of the high flows. Then the rains came, and the emergency response mainly took place amongst our mechanics and our instrument techs who responded to all the facilities that were flooded. And that was, and also to the power outages. And that was to prevent any life safety issues with our employees. Once the rains passed, everything was safe. All of our facilities were safe to work at again. We moved to business continuity, getting any functions that were offline back online, which most of them are, and a big one that's still offline is our ability to divert water upstream of RD1. And so that's just a good example, recent example I thought to use to bring home this graph. That's a little difficult to do, so I'll go back here. All right, this graph just simply shows the continual process. The program, the district's readiness is continual, right? It's continually moving forward. This is a cycle that shows how it moves forward. Mitigation boils down to assessments, and then identifying risks from those assessments, and then putting in measures to mitigate those risks, right? Preparedness is planning, plans, training, response is like example I just gave, and recovery is bringing everything back online. So again, with the largest scale emergencies, our approach when we have significant amount of functions that go offline is to be self-sufficient for the first 72 hours and then move forward with mutual aid. Where we came up with that number was during the last board workshop. Some may recall California Utility Emergency Association and CAL FIRE both said, you're going to have all the resources you need in 72 hours. And this is just a quick reminder that the program is guided by multiple laws. It seems there's a constant stream of laws being passed regarding my particular world in my program. These are the two main impacts right here to my program: the American Water Infrastructure Act and the Disaster Mitigation Act. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And this is just a photo tying everything together. You see this utility worker in this trench. This is actually recently as well. I would say a medium scale emergency, a leak over on Harbor Lane Road. You know, before he was able to respond in that crew, there took a lot of effort to buy the right tools, equipment, training, write the right plans, et cetera, or to have a successful response that we had. And just one more graph to bring home the program from linear, more of a linear direction from left to right. Simply said, this is a continual process, but from left to right, assessments are made where you identify risk, put in place measures to mitigate those risks. And that is in the form of infrastructure and system improvements, equipment and supplies, staffing, and we implement all through our annual budgeting, our capital and operational expense budget. All right, so move on to review the last workshop. Before the workshop took place, I did hire 2 consultants, the Utility Response Training Associates and Waterworks Engineer. With those consultants, myself and other subject matter experts within the district, we did a review, a gap analysis. We found, obviously the district's continually increased its readiness over the years, and we found more ways to continue to increase its readiness. We brought those topics up to the board, and the board discussed and also added some more suggestions. This is a graph I created that kind of sums up everything. When we talk about the gaps, no surprise here because this covers everything. The topics are within staffing, plans, training, and capital. Excuse me. And this column on the left here, the gap analysis, that's just a high level view of where we can improve. The board, exec staff, myself, we all did discuss. And some additional suggestions were made, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And the final column is just the related laws, because part of my responsibility is to continue to stay compliant and to make everything line up. So when we talk about staffing, we're going to talk about a few topics here in the gaps. I'm going to say I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it because we did discuss this at the last workshop. I'm just talking about a few, but there's multiples in the work plan. With staffing, simply put, when you talk about staff, talk about field staff, you talk about office staff, and you talk about the larger scale disasters that would really have a major impact to our business. You just have people that need to be ready to respond, know what to do. Currently we have positions identified. We have staff that does respond, both in the field and our EOC. It's just furthering all of that preparedness. In particular, which is a big discussion, Director Weed of yours and others, last workshop is the ability to work with mutual aid and to manage mutual aid, which was noted and is put into the work plan.
Hey,
Jake, just quickly, I
Sethy.
noticed that.
Jake, this is Paul Sethy. How many slides do you have to go through? I have a set of questions I would like to ask. I'm just trying to determine how long your presentation is going to go on.
I think I'm on 18, I think of 43, I believe.
It shows 46.
46. So if you give me about another, I'm going pretty fast in my rehearsal, give me about another 20 minutes, 25.
Okay.
Unless there's something.
Keep my questions in reserve. I'll keep my questions in reserve.
No, I appreciate it. The only reason I asked is because maybe I'll answer it. And maybe not. If I don't answer it, go ahead and ask. These are some photos here again that we're talking about staffing. As we know, we're very active with emergency response. I mean, that's some of our employees' full-time job here. And also with our own agency, but also with other agencies. And Director Gunther, I know you said, and Director Huang, that we'd like to continue our help with other agencies, right? So I just show this, put the slide together here to show an example of all, 240 plus employees, really it really affects everyone, the need to be ready in the program. So here you see another example of the flooding because of the sinkhole in Harbor Lane. It's one of our utility workers. There's one of our instrument techs responding to PG&E's public safety power shutoffs. Here's Adam Wardo, one of our utility workers responding to Paradise PID after the fire went through the irrigation district. And here's a couple of our employees who worked in EOCs on mutual aid, Dan over in Sonoma and Leonard Ash over in Butte County. So move on to planning. Like I said, I'm just going to review a few topics. There are a lot of plans. I brought some here today. The main two, when we talk about plans, are the emergency response business continuity plans. So the gaps identified within those, with the emergency response plan, Appendix B is a big one. Both these plans, the emergency response and the business continuity, were updated. Actually, business continuity was written. It wasn't completed. It was updated and written and published in 2020. Emergency response plan was updated in 2020. More needs to be done. There's always room for improvement, in particular the emergency response plan, Appendix B, the earthquake action plan. That's going to be where most of the time will go during the next update. Business continuity plan, chapter 3. Like I said, we identified all the mission and essential function related staff. Director Weed, one of your often suggestions is cross training, for in particular the earthquake scenario. Before you could do that, we had to identify staff, which that chapter did, prioritize all the function related staff. And also during COVID, we actually did do some cross train, some of John Wonderlick's staff cross trained to work with the production division. We found through that process, we've identified staff now, but it's challenging. We have a highly technical staff through all the departments. And so it's not easy just to throw some other hat on somebody, but we're going to further plan that out. And finally, when we review these plans for the last board workshop, we realized, in particular, emergency response, we're talking about life safety. You don't want field staff have to go through 200 pages to find something he needs now. So we're going to pull out some more appendices in both, so the critical information is readily available. When we talk about logistics, which is, again, I think everybody talks about logistics, all the directors, definitely the consultants, that was their number one thing. Because you think of, again, large scale disaster response, where are you going to put, where's the space to put your resources? And resources are people, supplies, equipment, et cetera, right? My analogy here is we have a base camp here, right? We're at one. If you go to the backside of this campus, we have our warehouse, 7 shops, garage, corporation yard. But we're kind of bursting at the seams just for daily response. So you can imagine if we have much more workload with much more mutual aid to help with that workload, we're going to need some additional space, right? And Cal Fire is in the same boat. Their base camps there, they're fire stations, but alternately, they can surge like they did here for this lightning complex. If you may remember, in 2020, there was a lightning complex started fire, so they called it LCU. The fire was east of Mission Peak, right? So because of the people were affected were within the area of the fire, they created this base camp up in Pleasanton at the fairgrounds up there. And so that's what this photo just demonstrates. When it comes to logistics, in my world, that's base camp operations. Here's a photo of Dean, who's doing the work in the utilities section up there. And final on the gap, on looking at gaps, and the biggest rooms for improvement is training. There was, when I first got hired, I was tasked with writing a plan, which I did, and start training, which I did. Still do training today. It took a big hit with COVID. And we have a lot of new employees, so it just needs to be revamped. It needs to be updated and formalized. Excuse me. And finally, capital. There was, our consultants And there's a few board suggestions regarding capital. When I say capital now, I mean anything we buy, whether it goes in the operational budget or a capital budget. There's a lot of suggestions, but obviously we can't just go out and start throwing in the budget and buying things, whether it's the consultants or anybody. So those capital suggestions from everybody is in the work plan and will be reviewed. One more photo to drive home everything. Again, with the emergency preparedness program, I thought these are a good photo. It's one of our exercises. It shows at one point there was an assessment. I believe this was Rizzoli Eidinger report with a seismic vulnerability assessment, where we determined we needed some redundancy in power and also some way to isolate mains. So the standby generator was installed and the isolation valves installed and lay flat hoses bought. SOPs were written, plans were made, and the staff trained on them. So it just kind of brings home everything right there. All right, to the final leg here of the presentation and the reason we're here today, the work plan. So yeah, we'll go ahead and move into it. And sounds like there's no questions yet, but I have seen some notes been taken. So give me about another 10 minutes here. The work plan is for going to go over a 5-year period, right? As I said, preparedness and the preparedness program as a whole is continual. It's cyclic, but what I'm going to talk to is the next 5 years. This work plan, as I said, is a recommendation, is an output of the gap analysis, the last board workshop, discussions, and our own internal analysis. So the first part of the work plan is, again, plans, updating them and remaining compliant. The next big lift for the emergency response plan and business continuity plan is due by March 2025. That's when the updates due. And as I said earlier, we're really going to focus on, in particular, the earthquake action plan. So when we talk about the first 72 hours, these are the primary areas that we're talking about. Plan to have staff available, knowledgeable, and trained, adequate equipment, supplies, caring for staff, and be self-sufficient. In addition to the self-sufficiency element of the first 72 hours, we need some more SOPs to facilitate, in particular, our distribution maintenance and our production division. SOPs to facilitate how to respond to just countless leaks and to deal with competing priorities for treating and delivering water. And the final part of that is the communications plan. We do have a communications plan, but as technology advances, we'd like to further look at, like, in particular, like GIS and how we can use it to communicate. So again, a big top 3 topics that come up a lot regarding the first 72 hours are, okay, what are you gonna do with all the leaks? We acknowledge that. It's in the work plan that's gonna be challenging. We know our utility workers, they're gonna be overwhelmed, and then you give them a bunch of mutual aid and you're gonna say, okay, now you're not only are you overwhelmed, you gotta supervise people. It's gonna be challenging. So we are gonna review that and write necessary SOPs and plans for that staff. For our treatment operators, I just saw from Paradise, which won't be much different than an earthquake here. There's definitely competing challenges and a sense of overwhelming as well with the operators, in particular when it comes to contamination and pressure. And so the solution there is, again, to write scenarios, write SOPs based off of those scenarios, and make clear what the district's priorities are, or in particular, like if you're going to push wet water for firefighting. So talking the slides here just to demonstrate how you communicate via GIS. This isn't necessarily this wasn't sent to our customers per se, was sent to stakeholders. Again, this is related to the SCO complex fire. There was East Mission Peak here. At one point, CAL FIRE reached out to us through our liaison and said, where's your infrastructure? Because they wanted to prepare to protect it. So again, the fire was east here. Base camp was up here. Firefighters were down here. This little window here gives all the data for Vineyard Heights tank, which was the closest piece of infrastructure we had to where the fire was. And so anyways, yeah, just give an example again, how we communicate via GIS, whether it's stakeholders, customers, or anybody. Again, I talked about training. To me, training's, I'd say, the priority. Why? It's really the linchpin that holds together everything, right? When we talk about preparedness and how it affects everything and the different topics, this ties it together. The capital that we have, whether it's tools or supplies or actual new infrastructure or upgrades, most of that's on standby until the disaster happens, right? So training helps evaluate how all the capital investments work, and then we could make necessary changes. All the plans and SOPs, those are just kind of sitting there, right, on somebody's shelf, unless there's training. And then those are evaluated and modified again. And then staff, they're always willing and wanting to train more because unfortunately, we see more and more interruptions to our business from these different threats out there. And everybody's willing to lean forward to learn more on how they can help prepare to respond. When we talk again about staff, the two buckets again are field staff and EOC. We focus on everybody. Field staff, when I talk about operations, I include Laura's water controllers who operate the creek, Kurt's treatment facility and plant operators who operate our portable water system, and even Groom's network technicians who operate our network. Those are their jobs, don't really change too much. They just get overwhelmed when there's a threat that interrupts our business. But they still need to be trained because they're on the front lines when things happen, no matter the scale of the disaster. And office staff, we put on a second hat. Right? A lot of us will report to the EOC in one manner or another. This is just a list of the different positions here on the bottom. This is a slide just to show some of our EOC staff who previously trained and to demonstrate, yes, we have a plan and program in place that needs to be updated. Everybody just wants to know their expectations, and we need to communicate that. I need to communicate that, formalize it, and make sure people are comfortable with what those expectations are. And then it helps, it provides value when they're called. And Shireen, this is her first time in the Joint Information Cell. It's our PIO, you guys probably recognize, everyone recognizes. Started with training, now she often works in that JIC whenever there's an emergency. There's Sean down there who was our liaison before Dean. And now Dean often reports to different areas to be a liaison. Now I spoke to the side, I got a little ahead of myself there. Just a review of our field staff again. And finally, when we talk about all of this, it takes funding, and funding is part of my program to an extent. The Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 did put in place a system, if you will, for all agencies to identify how they could mitigate disasters, and then the federal government would provide the funding to help with those mitigation measures. So that's what caused the existence of the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan. And that's why you'll see on the following slide here, there's multiple grant programs that help fund these improvements. So I'll talk about the HMP just real quick. It's It's another plan. It's legally required and it's on a cycle. It's on a 5-year cycle. Essentially, it's 2-part. The first part is the assessment of risks and natural hazards. And whenever I use the term risk, it's financial risk. You know, what's the financial losses here? The second part is the actual mitigation action plan. Currently, the district, Director Weed, you brought this up in the when we were eating sandwiches. So I didn't get too far into it because I knew I was going to talk about it again here. So we currently are updating our hazard mitigation plan. As Director Weed noticed, there is City of Fremont just hired a consultant. The reason being is the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, as I show here, is these jurisdictions, right? And City of Fremont is their representative, Alec. He is the project manager. So the steering committee, we actually landed a grant to fund the project. We selected the proposer, and the proposer sounds like was hired just this week. So that project starts soon. Now this, I do actually have.
Jake, Paul Sethy, I have my hand up. I'm reserving my questions to the end of the meeting, but I want to ask a quick question here. It was on the Fremont City Council agenda for approval this week, the cost for the consultant for the hazard mitigation plan. I think it was around $186,000 from what I recollect. So what are the other participating agencies putting in? USD, ACWD, Union City, and Newark.
So the projects was funded 100% by a grant. Now, there are some contingencies there. If there's some problems that go wrong, currently we're working on an MOU regarding financial transactions if there were anything to go wrong, but the grant was approved and it matches, is for actually more than what the contract awarded to the consultant is for.
So the city of Fremont is paying, City of Fremont is paying $186,000 to their consultant. My question is, what are we and the other jurisdictions paying?
Right. So the City of Fremont, Alec Tooney is the project manager. He's going to facilitate all, and this on behalf of the city, all financial transactions, and to include paying for 100% of the consultant's fees, and then having the city be reimbursed through the grant for 100% of the fees they paid, which means unless something goes wrong, the other agencies, well, even Fremont, no one will actually pay anything once the consultant's paid and the grant has been paid to the City of Fremont.
Right. So just to try and be really clear, there's the cost for the consultant is around 186,000 or so. The City of Fremont will pay all of that up front. They're supposed to be reimbursed entirely through this grant. In which case our share would be zero. We have some in-kind staffing and labor and so forth that we contribute. But in terms of consultant fees, it would be zero. But I do want to say that we are working right now on an MOU with between all these 5 entities that addresses participation in this HMP program. And that MOU will say that should, for whatever reason, the granting agency not actually come through with the grant or something breaks down, then we would be liable for our share, about 1/5 of the overall cost. So, just to clarify that, we expect to pay nothing. It's supposed to be fully grant funded. However, should something break down on that, we would be potentially liable for some share of that cost.
Okay.
Right now, that MOU is being prepared, and it may be such that the timing is such that that it may not come to the full board. It's within my authority in terms of dollars, but we did want to point that out because oftentimes we'll try and make sure that we're bringing, even though it's within the general manager's authority, if there are items of particular concern to the board, we'll want to bring the board along through an action. But I just want to mention that here, just in case things proceed such that I'm approving the MOU.
Okay, Mr. Stevenson, you may want to talk to your counterparts at these different jurisdictions, USD, City of Fremont, Union City, Newark. It was, as far as I read through the city council report, and it appeared that City of Fremont was paying $186,000 and that the other jurisdictions had to ante up. It wasn't clear, I don't even think, to the city council members that they were being reimbursed from a grant. That it almost appeared as though we're going to end up with $500,000 of responsibility from the various agencies. And I think that's where some clarification is needed. That's why I'm bringing it up right now in the middle of the presentation.
Thank you for bringing that up. And that's something we'll triple check because obviously that's pretty key. But so thank you.
Okay.
No,
And
This
we do
is
have,
a second iteration of this same plan. There was one that was initiated several years ago. So that this is basically another iteration of an existing plan, correct?
it is, and there's a, yeah. I brought you one back in 2017. And that didn't, like you said, didn't have Fremont. They just created their own. I think it was just administrative reason why that happened. This year we have all the stakeholders. We
Right,
reached
so-
out to everybody, so everybody that's involved is who agreed to.
So in the earlier round, Union City and Newark coordinated with ACWD. Fremont did not.
Yeah, I just honestly, I think they have like a vacancy. There's like some kind of administrative issue there. But
That's-
we're all
Thank you.
together on this one. So I do actually have two plans. So one more quick note. So we'll have a follow-up on that, but the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan project is going to move forward very shortly here. Now the plan is expired, right? So I knew about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, I had a sense of the way this was going, this multi-agency effort, that it was going to take longer than needed. I mean, not needed, that our plan would expire. So I did actually update our plan just administratively on our own. And then it's pending approval of Fremont right now, not Fremont, with FEMA. And so in March, the board Kurt will read you a staff report recommending we adopt our hazard mitigation plan. And the whole reason is, again, it was administrative update. So we don't jeopardize any pending grants we have, which we have two actually that are pending approval of FEMA. And that was all in response to, my advice from FEMA, CalWES, and local stakeholders as well. So the next steps for this plan is current pending approval of FEMA to ensure that we don't jeopardize current grants that are looked to be approved. Kurt's going to bring you a staff report asking to adopt that plan next month. For the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, the full comprehensive effort, the new analysis and related actions, that's kickoff meeting should be soon.
Right. So we recognize that can be confusing because we're starting one multi-jurisdiction HMP effort. And yet we're bringing an HMP to the board next month. But that is just essentially it's an interim hazard mitigation plan because we need to make sure we're always covered by one because it opens the door to grant funding. So we get that there's moving parts and things don't align exactly logically, but that's what it's about.
Right. So move forward. Almost done, and we open up to all the questions and suggestions. So
May I
again,
go
we have
first?
multiple. Oh yeah, let me just finish up here that we have multiple, assessments to take place. And as they take place and we identify mitigation measures, which could be everything from just more plans to actual new infrastructure or infrastructure upgrades. we're going to continue to make those, to implement those mitigation measures through our budget process. And then there's a review quickly of the grants. Director Sethy, I know that you have expressed interest in BRIC in the past, so just let me give a quick review. These are the 4 grants tied to the act and the plan, right? Pre-disaster mitigation grants. Currently, we have 2 pending. Those are seismic upgrades to Alameda and Patterson reservoirs. They got approved at CalWest and pending approval at FEMA. And right, so those are the 2 I was talking about, grants that we don't want to jeopardize, and they look like they'll be approved. There's a Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities program, which again is tied to this plan. We've monitored this grant program like every other one through our district's grant team. It's just what the intent of the funding last couple cycles didn't really meet any of our capital projects. So we didn't put in for any BRIC related grants. But again, Director Sethy, we're continuing to monitor all these grants, include BRIC, and if the funding and the purpose of the funding aligns with our capital, then will likely apply. Public assistance isn't a grant, but it's the same process. And currently right now, we actually signed up for public assistance, but we can always withdraw that. Ethan recently signed up due to the atmospheric river storms. You know, if there's a cost benefit analysis to seeking reimbursement, right? Depends on how much damages you have, then we can. And that's what we're doing, that analysis essentially right now, due to the damages from the storms. And there's post-disaster mitigation grants. The purpose of that program is, okay, disaster happens, several people were impacted, but whether you're impacted or not, federal government wants to fund you upfront just to further put mitigation measures in place in case that kind of disaster happens again. Right, I imagine that window is going to open pretty soon. And one last graph. This kind of puts all the different projects and ties them together over the next 5 years from now through fiscal year 27-28, from the assessments to related plans, mitigation measures, and what ties it all together on the bottom there, the training and exercises. All right, thanks for everyone's patience.
All right,
That's my presentation.
Vice President Gunther, would you allow me to go first?
Director Sethy, feel free, go ahead.
Okay, so I requested these set of emergency preparedness reviews a couple of years ago, and I really appreciate all the work of Jake and the rest of the staff on providing us with all this information. And despite that, as much appreciation as I have, I want to focus on some things that I feel are missing from our plan. And I hope you will take this in the best light. It's meant as an earnest appeal to think more broadly about what you're doing. So let's go backward in time here. First, several years ago, and I know Director Gunther and I were directly involved with this, we set up, I think, 6 stations around the our Tri-City area for emergency pipe repairs in case of an earthquake. They're all located near a firehouse for emergency purposes. Our 2008 seismic analysis, which was the most comprehensive the district has ever produced, indicated that we could have anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 main breaks, and that water pressure would be lost within 6 to 8 hours throughout our Tri-City community. I ran for the board based on that report and said we needed to pass some bonds and I was in those board meetings prior to being elected to the board, as you recall, that we needed to seismically repair our large diameter pipelines and then work downward. So the first suggestion I have is that we need to triple the number, at least triple the number of these storage areas for main breaks that we have. We know we're going to have them. It's going to be well over 1,000. We're going to lose water pressure, especially west of the Hayward Fault. Let me remind everybody that the periodicity of a major quake 7.0 or greater on the Hayward Fault going back 2,000 years, based on USGS data, is 90 to 165 years. We are in year 155 right now, based on the 1868 earthquake that destroyed everything from Richmond down to San Jose, including most of Mission San Jose, the historic Mission San Jose. We need to think seriously about protecting the community when it comes to a major earthquake. And the USGS says that this is the most vulnerable fault in the entire nation for a major earthquake costing up to $1 trillion. We better be prepared. In line with that, we know that that Alameda County Health Department is responsible for providing safe, clean water after a major disaster. But I would put forward to my fellow board members and the rest of the public that may be attending that when it comes to safe, clean water, most people in the community don't care where it comes from. They're looking to their local water district. And so to the extent that we can store vast amount of local water, that would be really good to have in an emergency plan. Number two, I just saw that one of our local communities is putting up watersheds where people could come in and load up on 50 gallons of water at a time. And I think that's a really good idea. We have the opportunity to set up fire hydrants that are specially operated for an emergency so that people, if they're properly retrofitted, people can store up some water while they need it during an emergency. These are simple ideas, and we don't want to be pointing fingers in the middle of a major emergency. We want to say, hey, we know the county is really responsible, but we're here to take care of you. In the end, I think that we as board members, representatives of our community, will be evaluated on whether we took care of people. And so even if it's not our direct responsibility, let's make it our indirect responsibility to provide for these things. When it comes to the BRIC program, these are areas where we can apply for funds. The BRIC program is purposefully designed for building resilient communities. And we have so many opportunities right now to help build a resilient water district. And I'm not seeing this in this plan right now. I hope the staff will work on it and make it a more progressive plan. And these brick opportunities should not be lightly looked at. The staff needs to work hard on trying to make a persuasive case based on the vulnerability of our community to a major earthquake and what we have to do to build a resilient community around what we're doing or trying to operate as a water district. The last point I would like to make ties in with cybersecurity, which I did not see in this presentation. So tomorrow, if anyone wants to join, CSDA is putting on a Emergency Preparedness Summit 2023. The whole program was put together by the USC University Public Policy Institute or Public School of Public Policy from 9 to 1 tomorrow. It's a very integrated program, very well put together. And it includes cybersecurity. I would ask board members and staff to join in that presentation tomorrow. I will be there from 9 to 1. And when it comes to cybersecurity, I've mentioned this to our general manager, Mr. Stevenson, that based on what's been brought up at Aqua and CSDA meetings, we need to coordinate with the Oakland Office of National Security on cybersecurity planning. And I have asked Mr. Stevenson, I'm going to re-request it again right now, and then I'll shut up. We need to have an audit of the water district, a complete cybersecurity audit from our national security folks who specialize in this, and they're right here in Oakland, and they're willing to come in and do a complete top to bottom audit of the water district. What are all the vulnerabilities, not only cybersecurity, but physical and personnel wise and other things. And I highly encourage us to get that cybersecurity or national security audit done. And with that, I will turn it over to the other board members.
I just wanted to make sure you're aware, we have completed that work with Department of Homeland Security in Oakland, in addition to other audit work that we've had done from private firms. We haven't come back to the board yet, so you didn't know that, but we have done that, and we continue to work on a number of different audit avenues. So we will be compiling this type of information to share with the board in the appropriate setting.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much for following up on my recommendation.
Any further comments, Director Sethy? Or you?
Oh, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay, we'll go to Director
I welcome hearing from other directors.
Thank you. My impression is that we're responding to a federal program for hazard mitigation, which is a terrible misnomer, as no one's mitigating any hazards. We're actually, as you look into the program, we're looking at identifying what the risk is, a risk assessment, and developing, identifying some capabilities to respond to certain risk. But it is not a disaster preparedness plan. Second, and these are editorial comments primarily, when we talk in 72 hours, that is not a major disaster response. There are incident responses which might be handled in 72 hours, but a disaster will take us months, if not years, to recover from. And that would be a national. So are we talking about a 2-fold increase in our operations, a 10-fold increase in our operations, or a 100-fold increase in our operations? Each is a different level. There's no distinction in the report that was presented to us, identifying that there are certain levels of response, each with a different character and different funding source. Next is the mission. In a disaster under FEMA, The mission of this district is to provide sanitary flows and fire flows. While we may well do potable water, if you do that, any efforts in that area, you should get the authorization of the county health department, because FEMA will be funding the county health department to take on that. And if we don't have it done to their auspices, we may not be reimbursed for those expenses. When is your level of service being able to return to a level of service? Again, it could extend into a much longer time frame. I think we have to assume that we will lose, we may well lose our primary water supply for an extended period of time. 60% of our water is imported, 40% local sources, and much of that is facilities that capture sources. So very little of that water is in place in the district. We have to find a way to be able to tap into the groundwater reservoir with the assumption that we will not have a distribution system, a functioning distribution system. We have to find ways to preserve our stored water with automatic turnoff valves so that we don't lose the water that we have stored and see that drained away. We've seen where even fires, irrigation systems drain the water of a system and they get drained dry in short order, and they've lost all their ability to fight fires or even provide sanitary flows. There's nothing in this on the communication to the public and how they'll respond. How do we inform the public of what's going on? How will they'll be able to monitor what's going on and change the security mindset of the district that what we're doing needs to go out to the public in detail in real time. It's not necessarily protected, secure information at that point. The need to totally repurpose your organization is a concept. You don't plan for disasters, you prepare for them. You have no idea what it's going to be. And it could be COVID, it could be a whole variety of things. So it's disaster preparedness, not planning. The ability to outsource or remotely provide many of your key services becomes important because you may lose all of your local infrastructure. So if it becomes responding to telephone calls and inquiries, running your IT, that's not done here. That's done somewhere else in an area that's not been impacted by a regional disaster. The idea of how we respond, it's primarily a logistics effort. You do not want, we made a mistake in spreading out a variety of locations around the district with our security. You want them where you can manage them in one place, in one locale, because it's logistics is your issue. If you can get a backhoe to a site, then my God, you can get the Iconics with some materials to the same site. But how do you get to and from it? So I have a challenge. I understand what we're trying to do and working with a particular program, but this is not disaster preparedness. This is not the solution that we need as a district. We need something far more. We've done a great deal in the area of finances by being able to code our expenses in times of an emergency and be able to then get reimbursement. We need to do more on our rate structure so that we're not dependent upon commodity fees coming in, and ideally put our billings onto the property tax where the funding is more secure and only comes in a couple of times a year rather than having to get ongoing billings. Paradise learned that lesson, and hopefully we can learn something from Paradise and the disaster there. So all of that comes into play, but I guess fundamentally, we're going through the process, but it really does not address how you're going to handle 1,000 to 2,000 breaks in 30 days or approximately, pick a timeline, and what the resources are going to be required and how you're going to, the term mutual aid is not appropriate in those cases. because those are resources we do not have mutual agreements with. Those are outside resources that come in. And realize that what you're dealing with is contingency engineering, which is different, fundamentally different than O&M or capital construction. You can't identify what the real issue is going to be. You have all the funding you can and personnel you can gainfully employ. So it is a totally different way to approach an issue. And I don't know that this district has yet grasped that mindset, nor has the much of the industry. So thank you.
Well, I guess I'll give it a try. So I think what you're hearing is the difference between, I guess, our approach. You're following the ICS system. So a lot of the detail, such as logistics, how many breaks, where we're going to get water, yada, 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 and the communication plan, how are we going to reach out to a community? In the incident command system, those plans will be developed as you go based on site-specific conditions. So I think what you're hearing from at least two directors is that I think there is a desire on this board to have something that's hybrid, that's a little bit more detailed than the very high-level hazard mitigation plan, the whole traditional ICS command that this will happen once we know the realistically how many break and where. Right, so if it's possible, it would be something like, if this happens, we're expecting Y numbers of breaks, and we have the intention to deploy X number of people from this group, if possible. So really high level of intent. I think perhaps that's would be a bit more what would make us feel a little bit better. I know it's pretty hard because we're basically asking you to guess, right? What would happen after an earthquake on Hayward Falls? So think of it perhaps as a exercise, as a response exercise. If this happens, what would you do? What would the logistics section approach this problem?
If I could, Director Huang and Director Weed. So just for clarification, so we don't plan on a disaster lasting 72 hours.
I understand.
Yeah. So Director Weed, that you said, that wasn't an incident. No, yeah, we understand. So I know you're referring to the Eidinger study. And so what I was trying to communicate to you is the Eidinger study focuses on earthquake. And our program has to prepare for everything. We are going to put a significant amount of resources in the work plan, significant amount of resources to prepare for the earthquake. And to all those topics you brought up are in the work plan. So how to scoping out how to respond to the leaks, right? For over 1,000 leaks, 6 months without a water. We are going to review that. We're going to assess that. We're going to develop a plan. That's in the scope. So as far as when you're talking about priorities of firefighting, we've been listening to you, and that is in the work plan as well. What to do with our water system and how to get potable water here. So these are all topics we are going to address. So I'm sorry for, it seems like I wasn't able to communicate that through this part right here when I was reviewing the work plan. And I guess it could have been worded a little bit better.
Okay, I think the point I was making is your hazardous mitigation plan doesn't address, it's not in the format of the plan that we're coordinating with the city of Fremont. This is a disaster preparedness effort on our own.
Yes.
But the hazardous mitigation plan structured under this grant is a much more limited function and role, and it's basically a risk assessment.
Yes, and it's a separate, right? We have our own concerns for sure as a water utility and different than these other agencies, maybe more similar with USD. So, which we're going to address as part of the work plan is address all these topics you brought up, in particular to the Eidinger, or I should say the seismic vulnerability assessment. There's more to be done. All those topics you brought up. The hazard mitigation plan, I mean, you can say it's separate, there's some overlap, right? But yes, it's a separate project. It's the intent of that project is multi-jurisdiction efforts.
I see.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is we do have a specific plan for ACWD that would direct that would address the director's concerns.
Yes.
The multi-jurisdictional plan is at a higher level because it has to address the broader interests of the group.
Correct. And also,
Okay.
we have to
That's fine.
have that plan in place to pursue what Director Sethy was
Right.
talking about, the BRIC and all the other grant related funding. And we'll continue to give BRIC a hard look, Director Sethy. So to just give you an example, I believe the last time BRIC came available and it was funded, it was for like, it was targeted for impoverished communities. And so based off our projects on our CIP and the income of our residents in our jurisdiction, it was really hard to find something to apply for. But we acknowledge what you say with, fighting for the district when there's a chance to apply for a grant. I totally get that.
I would encourage us to avoid the use of the word plan as much as possible and a disaster preparation mindset. Because you don't know what the parameters are, you don't know what the element will be. It's what is your approach and how will you, the ability to restructure and repurpose an organization in its entirety to address a completely different set of circumstances at a scale which is orders of magnitude greater than our normal operations. That is a huge challenge. It's not going to be identified in this, in the present hazardous mitigation plan. And I'm not certain it'll be fully addressed in the way we're approaching it in our
Yeah.
work.
If somehow they came off that I said that's going to be solved through the hazard mitigation project, it's not. I agree with you. And also I agree, and Kurt and I agree, internally the district needs to plan. That's what I was trying to communicate. I'm sorry, I failed to communicate that. In particular with the scenario in the seismic vulnerability assessment. We agree on all topics on how we could further our preparedness.
Okay, that actually addressed some of my concerns. I
Right.
do have two recommendations.
Sure.
So this one is actually what Director Reed already brought up, is that we perhaps as part of business continuity plan, we want to consider having an alternate location. I work for an agency that's required to have what's called a COOP, a continuation of operation plan.
Right.
And yes, the first thing usually in a required element is have an alternate location, just in case your normal meeting location or headquarters is impacted by the incident. So think about that. I am not telling the general managers to go out right now and buy
Yeah.
us a building somewhere down south. No,
Yes.
but think about it.
And Caroline and I took a look at that in chapter 7 of our business continuity plan.
Okay,
And we got further planning to do. We
Okay.
have space in our own district. You can get contracts for modular devices, right? And have those trucked in. You can have, if it's legally allowed, have, contracts in place for like hotels, et cetera. And, but yeah, we need to get all that done.
and the second recommendation is that you mentioned using GIS as a form to communicate with our partner agencies. I would encourage you to think about also using the GIS system along with the web as a form to communicate to our customers. I will say that other agency that I work for responded to Paradise. The job of that particular agency is to clear household hazardous waste. And there's actually a GIS map, base map that's updated daily about what address will be addressed the next day, within the next week, what EPA's team is currently working on, and what houses has been cleared. So I can see something similar as part of communication plan, let our customer know that, these lines are impacted. You could come here to get water, or these line has been addressed. So think about that. That is a recommendation. That's not a requirement.
Right.
Because it is a very powerful tool if we could just think a little bit outside the box.
Quickly add.
I would
fully
like
agree.
to buttress what Director Huang is saying, since I've served the last dozen years on the Southern Alameda County GIS JPA. And I'm the second longest serving member, by the way. So there's a lot to leverage in that SACGIS system. Nakvi is our lieutenant, responsible for those activities with our southern agencies and jurisdictions. And so I would really like to support Director Huang on what she's saying. We need to really look into that, and they also have capabilities of going out through ham radio and other means to support the community, the Tri-City area. Thank you.
Yes, fully in agreement with particularly the outreach to the community, but the alternate location, I encourage you to consider a virtual alternate location or a remote, but the use of being able to communicate without having to be in one physical position for many of these critical functions may well be possible for us as we develop it. The meta world. Thank you.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, thank you for the presentation and the updates today. I do really wish that we had members of the public to listen to this, because obviously this is very important information and involves a lot of public input. But nonetheless, I appreciate everything that you're doing to help prepare us. I do have a few questions that I want to ask you first. So you kind of talked a little bit about the work that we did in providing mutual aid to Paradise after their fire, and then addressing the complex fire, and then also just lessons learned through COVID. So can you talk a little bit about some of the really specific things that we would update in our plans based on lessons learned from those emergencies, or things that were kind of validated as being the right way of addressing particular emergencies based on those experiences?
Sure. Let's see, where do we start? With COVID, before COVID, we were wondering, Director, we were just talking about this, working remotely. And, we figured out how to do that real quick. So that is something when it comes to alternate facilities and how to surge staff and get them to still be of value when they're not here. That is something new, right? We always plan on just having everybody here. Also with COVID, again, I was talking about with cross-training, right off the bat, we realize there's a threat that we can't see, and it may just completely take out some of our staff, meaning, everybody gets infected. And of course, our biggest concern is our treatment plant facility operators. So we began cross-training, staff that we could, that can, essentially do a little bit less of their daily job and get ready to work as an operator if they need be. I'd say those were the two biggest takeaways of COVID, was just refreshing business continuity plans and learning how to work remotely. Through these other events, it's like at the higher level, we send field staff, right? So for like Paradise, actually we sent field staff and we sent EOC staff. We sent two utility workers. I say if nothing, more than anything else, I should say, is they gained leadership experience because they had to go to a whole nother agency, work with new people, and sometimes, be like a crew leader, right? With people that aren't your people. So that's similar to a role they'd have to perform here. They'd have to learn real quick to work with other people that aren't familiar with our distribution system and our way. And so I think, definitely gain a lot of leadership experience to those. With staff that we put in the EOC, like Leonard, EOC is just, it's just about prioritizing and coordinating. It's a big coordination center so they can set priorities for staff and resource them. And so there's just a lot of processes. You have to learn the language and the processes, which, Leonard was able to do up there, and also Dan and myself when we went. Paradise, one thing that's, very Now, I guess with the earthquake scenario here is their system was wiped out. And, frankly, the town's not being repopulated. When I went and talked, Caroline went and interviewed the operations manager. And, I got a whole AAR. I go on a whole workshop on that, but I won't. Essentially, there was definitely a ton of lessons learned from there. I guess the hardest, the most challenging is when Director Wee talks about priorities with the operators, right? After like the big earthquake, what are their priorities going to be? In Paradise, immediately, you had backflow causing contamination, but you still want to push water for firefighting. Then you have loss of pressure, and then you have leaks, and then you have loss of telemetry because everything burned down. So you're sending runners everywhere. So you really don't know what's going on. Your system, you maybe have water that's contaminated. You may have to valve off one zone and still use another zone for firefighting, but the other one not use it all because it doesn't have enough pressure. So you just realize how all these events are compounding, and you really got to ahead of time set priorities. You really got to think through the scenarios, write SOPs, and set priorities. There's more to go on, but I think that's the big takeaways.
No, I appreciate that. I think, when we talk about providing mutual aid, one of the ancillary benefits of that is that we get to learn something from those disasters. And so I'm glad to hear that we're taking some of those takeaways, and I'm hoping that that'll be reflected in the updates to the plans.
Totally, yeah, they'll be in the work plan.
Great. Now, I don't know if this is a question to you, or maybe this is a question to the engineering team, but obviously we're doing the rollout of our smart meters, and I'm curious if we see those meters helping us in any way with emergency response and what that could look like.
I can certainly respond to that. With the AMI meter installation, what has come to the district is the customer web portal, right? The app and the web portal that customers can communicate with the district, not only obtain water consumption data, but also get information about the district. And so that's one way that I see the AMI project increasing contact of customers with the district, and a way to share information and provide maybe more reliable data and information to customers. And to the extent that we see unusual activity in certain areas of the district or the service area, because we see water consumption going up significantly higher than usual, or leaks that are not supposed to be there, that could tell us what's happening in that particular area, or how we can respond to what might be happening in that area. So I see those two as potential benefits.
Okay, yeah, those were the two.
Mr. Awoke, if I might make a comment here. This is specifically the concern that comes up. We're going to have immediate communications with our customers through AMI, and many customers will get a message that you may not have any water for the next 30 days. There's lack of water pressure. You may not have fire protection. And that comes back to the preparedness plan. How do we communicate with customers, and what relief do we offer them in the interim? So Director Akbari brings up a good question, but the immediate response is that this is going to alert customers to the unforgivable problems that they're going to be undertaking over maybe a month-long time period or more. We know from that 2008 assessment that it could be 6 to 8 months before water is completely restored throughout the community and water pressure is proper for both potable water supply and for fire. So these are the challenges that we're dealing with.
So if I could real quick, Groom. So Director, we do have in chapter 6 of our response plan, crisis communication plan. And I just want to say real quickly, daily we do communicate to our customers. Obviously, we have our approach is to take every means possible to reach our customers. So that includes social media, a rapid area notification system, district website, every possible means. AMI is just another way. So we have a communications plan. There's always, due to technology, new ways, like in particular through GIS, which we're going to look at. That's in our work plan. And, I'm confident now we can communicate anything we need to communicate to our customers right now. And then we'll continue to build on that.
Yeah, I think you're hearing a lot of concerns about how we go about communicating with our customers. I think basically every director so far has mentioned that. And so I think getting a little bit more of a communications plan around that, and not just the ways that we can communicate, but also how, I don't even know how to say this, but what we communicate is going to be very important as part of, you talked about the first 72 hours being the most critical. In the first 72 hours, communication is also going to be incredibly critical for us, because that's how our customers are going to understand the challenges that they should foresee for the next month, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, what it might be. But now, I guess my final question, you talked a little bit about training board members as well as part of your overall training program. I kind of missed on exactly what that training will look like and what the expectations are from the board, because I think there's, we're kind of the face of the district in many ways to the community. So it's very important that we're well prepared and well trained. So can you talk a little bit about what that training will look like for board members, and then what the expectations will be from board members during an emergency operation?
Do we get
Sure, so
extra pay for this?
I don't know if I comment on that. It's not scoped out yet, but Director Huang brought this up last workshop, and I reached out to CalWS about training, what training is available. Where I'm at with them, they said yes, they're fine with bringing it here and providing it. What it is, I got to scope out further. So I still got some phone calls to do with CalWS to, book training, and some coordination obviously to do with Ed and you guys. I'll get back to you on, what the deliverables are, what that's the expectation, right? What you're going to learn. But I know from my experience, I can say from my experience, it's going to be overwhelming for everyone, to include you guys. The main thing is supporting the GM and exec staff while they focus on getting the system going again. And you guys bring up communication. I totally get it. Just as important our system is communication. If you have a problem, you cause any problems communicating with customers, that can almost be as bad as the system itself. And so that's where Ed and the exec staff and you'll see everybody's going to be focused as a system and communication. But yeah, just supporting them as much as you can, and in particular working with other elected officials, right? Because I think Sethy brought it up. There will be some possible of that, right? Who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for that? But that's just from my experience. Again, I'll have to get back to you on what a course would look like. They would set those. And
I think it'll be very important for us to flesh that out because obviously, of course, we're going to be supporting the staff and the GM in their response, but it would be good for the board to understand our responsibilities and expectations as well. I did have another question on cybersecurity, but I'm going to table that for now simply because we have the audit coming. And Director Sethy also brought that up. My professional background is in cybersecurity, so I'm uniquely or just very interested in that. I'll probably table that until we see the results of the audit, but it would be good to get an understanding of what we're doing to prepare on that side of things as well. What vulnerabilities we foresee today, and then what we can do to mitigate those vulnerabilities as well. But otherwise, I appreciate the updates that you provided today. Obviously, you heard some questions and concerns from the board, but I think we're I'd like to think we're moving in a good direction to at least flesh this out and kind of give us a framework for how we would respond in an emergency. So thank you, Jake.
Thank you, directors.
Okay, I'm going to go back to a few things that Director Sethy mentioned at first, because I agree. The county, yes, is required to provide potable water. Understand that. But if we're in a bad situation, we need to be able to answer that question, because the answer of county does that isn't going to work. It just won't work.
County
To
can
say
authorize it.
that the county, to say, oh, that's their problem, doesn't sit with me to begin with. I know it's not our responsibility on paper. And I agree that if we're going to try to maybe do some of that, we should be able to get the money to return that value. But we need to work with the county that they're ready. I'm not ready to put all my eggs of potable water in our county. First thing, our county runs from, Oakland, Berkeley, all the way down to us. So we got a pretty good sized county. And it's gonna be, we're just gonna be one little piece of that. And the public out there doesn't look for the county, except for we have one advantage, it's in our name anyway, to provide their water. So that's one thing. I just think we have to be ready. I understand that on paper, it's their responsibility. But to go back 20, 30 years, we didn't have containers with parts or pipe. We've done a lot in 25 years, incredible amount. We've protected our crossings over the Hayward Fault. We've scattered some containers around. I know there's maybe some conflict of whether we centralize or we scatter. I kind of fall in the line of scattering. I also fall in the line that if we can, certainly increase, just like Director Sethy said. But I leave that up to staff to determine, if we would need more, but they'd certainly have my support if they wanted more. We can't forget, we've got multiple boundaries and barriers in our district. We've got 2 major freeways that cut across us. Those intersections across those major freeways are probably going to be down if it hits here. We also only have like 7 road crossings. I think it's 4 rail bridges and maybe 1 footbridge over Alameda Creek. And I don't think we think much about Alameda Creek being a boundary until you want to try to drive over to Union City at rush hour. Pre-pandemic. That could be a major issue. Because what happens in an earthquake, a lot of times it's getting around. All the overpasses are gone. Sending people out to other disaster sites, I think, is one of our best values. Whether it be a fire, I think Cretina, I don't know if that was our first time we did it, but we learned incredible, valuable lessons there, working with Liberty Water. In a hurricane, you lose large swaths of infrastructure. Gone. Exxon Valdez taught the Coast Guard something. That oil spill, Valdez, Alaska, had, I think, 1 hotel. They were trying to figure out logistics to move their people, all the support people, to clean that spill up, not to mention where it was in the middle of the wild, to deal with that. And they were drawing from members of the Coast Guard from everywhere. If you didn't have a critical job, they were in headquarters pulling people to go to Alaska. And they had no place to put these people. They didn't have food to feed them. They didn't have support structures. The Navy was going to literally send up a bunk ship. These are things that we probably want to be ready for. I know you're working on it. Appreciate it. Plan will never cease. But we are so much further along than where we were. When we send somebody to Paradise, we send somebody to Katina, for any of these fires, any of these disasters, it gives that employee an opportunity to not only see what happens in that EOC, what happens outside the EOC. The fact that there's no, and a fire relatively concentrated. Granted, they're big, but I can't remember where we had to put our employees up for the Paradise Fire. It was like the nearest town was miles away for support. So these are valuable lessons. They see, and they get to talk, you've done this with the employees that aren't able to see their families, that are going to be at work for weeks. So there's a lot of this. I hate to say it. I don't think the Bay Area is ready. I do believe we are shoemaker's kid. You know, I mean, here I know this stuff. I don't have my 55-gallon barrel full of water yet. I have the barrel. But, you know, we should all have that barrel. We should all have that barrel filled with water. But these are things that we are ahead of. We need to stay ahead of. And I think this plan is certainly one part of that, working with Fremont, Union City, Union Sand. Union Sand's on the other side of Alameda Creek. These are the benefits that we have by working these plans together. Appreciate your efforts. Full support. Obviously, we're not all going to agree on everything, but I think we do agree on one thing, which is we need to keep going. We need to keep pursuing. We're not there yet. Will we ever be there? Always have to be able to pivot. As soon as you think you're ready, it hits you with something else and you're not ready to pivot. Got to be able to be pivoted. Further comments from the board? Questions?
I actually have one more question. So
Sure.
for this first 72 hours, do we have a communication plan? The reason I ask is if memory serves me right, based on one of the briefing I heard on Paradise, they have no cell service, no telephone.
Right. Yeah.
So they were actually all sitting and waiting for a cell phone company to come up to set up temporary cell tower. So
Right.
I'm not telling you to go back to smoke signals, but if there's a way to figure out how to communicate with our customers
Right.
without, I guess, cell phone or internet, perhaps.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely look at that. That is a common mutual aid request now.
Okay,
Yeah, but we need to write that process down.
yeah,
And also if there's contracts to get in place, get them in place. But I know CUA provides Verizon all the time is asked for mutual aid for these.
just think about
yeah.
it, because if we have to be self-sufficient for 72 hours or however long, that.
Yeah. Right.
That's it.
How are we gonna talk to people? And Dr. Gunther, I'd say there are a lot of there's a lot of agreements, just people speak them differently.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got all the suggestions. If there's any more.
Yeah,
Director Sethy,
I have some comments here. First of all, I know I'm speaking remotely, but I'd like to ask Mr. Stevenson a process check. Where are we on the agenda right now?
This is the main item for our meeting this evening. We do have GM reports following this. I have one brief report, and then I think there are a couple of director reports on meetings attended, but that's about it.
All right, Director Weed and I were planning on giving our director reports for the Cal D-Cell conference last week, but I had anticipated that I would be there in person and I wanted to pass out the materials. It was an excellent conference, and so I would like to share those materials with the board on March 9th when we have our regular board meeting. And I think Director Weed would concur. He also attended the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority meeting one afternoon. So we'll postpone that. And for Director Huang, as a student who graduated from Mission San Jose High School, I was a responsible journalist for our newspaper, which is called The Smoke Signal, and still is. And so thank you for the smoke signals across the airwaves here. I will only make this one comment about CalDCel. I've attended, I think this is my 12th year, and we started out with only about 20 people. And Walt Wadlow, and then Bob Shaver, who I saw earlier today, just incidentally, and then Mr. Stevenson have all been on the board of CalDCel. And we now had close to 160 people that attended. It was the most well attended. It's been growing year by year. And was just an outstanding conference. That's all I can say. Every year it's gotten better and better. And I know Mr. Stevenson was an important part of putting together the agenda for it, but I will share my thoughts on March 9th when I can distribute the agenda and other materials, okay?
That's great. We'll have reports from both you and Director Weed on the agenda for March 9th.
I had just one final thing, just a question on the cybersecurity audit report. Were you planning on bringing that back to the engineering and IT committee or to the full board, or?
So, yeah, so there's actually a fair amount of information that we want to ultimately provide. There's audit, and then there's also results from some penetration testing and some other things that we've done. Given the security sort of nature of that information, it's likely we'll probably want to bring that to a closed session on the board. But there may be things that we can share just in terms of general updates. But we'll be talking internally about that. And but if you've got particular interests or requests, I'd love to hear them, and we can make sure that we're addressing them.
Yeah, no, I think I was going to suggest potentially bringing it back to the whole board, and in closed session actually it's ideal. So I'm sure we'll have more questions.
Right.
But thank you.
I can make one summary comment about our approach toward disaster preparedness.
What's the difference between a semi-comment and a comment?
Part of it is the developing a capital construction and facilities that can respond and have resiliency. That means you have 24/7 power. Rather than going with solar, you go with natural gas as an alternative power source and a prioritization element. You look at an alternate water supply, you stay out of open channels, you build facilities such as the Niles Canyon Aqueduct, adapt them for water supply 24/7, keeping it in a pipe, particularly when you have very vulnerable inflatable dams. Those type of things should be ingrained in the culture. We talk about a culture of safety, we need a culture of disaster preparedness. And there should be a line item when we do our assessment and rack and stack our various projects, particularly capital construction projects, to take into account what is the ability to respond to a long-term outage or problem, a duplication of effort, alternate supplies. That also includes our water supply, being able to integrate the various zones within our district so that if we lose one area, we can supply it from another. It's a different way than we have traditionally thought, and it goes to the fundamental operations of the district. And as we can say, you can't predict what it'll be, whether it be COVID or a contaminated groundwater reservoir, whatever it is, it's a fundamental change, and you have to be able to adjust and adapt. And that is something we can do. It's not planning, it's a mindset of programming. Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Mr. Stevenson.
I think that's about it from staff. on this topic this evening. So if you're okay, we can just move on to a quick general manager's report. Okay, this just,
Yeah, thanks.
thanks a lot, Jake.
Thanks. And also, I never thank my management here, and they've had to work with me a lot the last year to prepare for this. I want to thank Kurt and Ed formally for getting ready for this workshop, and thank you, directors. I did truly enjoy it.
Thank you, Jake.
All right, so just quickly in terms of a general manager's report, I just wanted to let the board know, I sent you all an email yesterday. Has to do with a couple of upcoming opportunities for participation on some industry boards and commissions. There's two currently sort of out there. One is a seat on the executive committee at the Aqua JPIA. That one, the nomination and application would need to be made by March 24. Director Weed has expressed interest in that role. And in fact, I believe, Director Weed, you're the only one that actually is eligible to serve on the executive committee because you're actually on the board of the Aqua JPIA.
That was not, I didn't understand that to be one of the criteria.
Yeah, it's not in big bold lettering. So I missed it myself, but I believe that's the case. However, this was to be an opportunity for anyone else to signal their interest in running for that seat. There's one vacancy for a 4-year term on the Aqua JPIA executive committee. If there is interest, and there is, but if there's interest by more than Director Weed, we'd want to be able to agendize an item for action at the March 9 board meeting for the board to consider nominating someone or Director Weed himself for that role so that we can ensure that he's set up to apply. So we'll be trying to address that on March 9. So I wanted to kind of see whether there was any other interest, and I'm kind of looking around and looking at my screen too to see if Director Sethy is waving his hands.
I would love to allow Director Weed, if he so desires to.
There's interest in allowing him
He doesn't
to.
have to
Oh, yes.
nominate himself.
It'll be my third effort to get into the click.
Okay. All right. So that's the direction we'll move for March 9. There will be another opportunity for a seat that's currently vacant on the California Special Districts Association board. That's not due till a little bit longer. So what I'll do at the March 9 meeting is inquire as to whether anybody is interested in that seat so that we can do the similar thing in April at the April board meeting. So you have some information available to you about those opportunities in that email that I sent you. So we will proceed accordingly. We'll move forward with an item related to Aqua JPIA for Director Weed on March 9, and then we'll also inquire about interest in the CSDA slot. And the Director Sethy, I heard you chime in.
Yeah, is that position for the Alameda County Special Districts Association, or is this the one for LAFCO?
No, okay, so the LAFCO item, and I still have to get back to you, Director Sethy, the LAFCO item, we're actually not eligible to participate as a commissioner for the open seats on LAFCO. Because we're an enterprise district, that seat is only open to a non-enterprise district. This was the former seat that was held by Ann Weiskamp. So I did confirm that with the executive officer at LAFCO. So our role there, President Sethy, and I'll talk to you some more. We don't really have this on the agenda this evening, but our role there is to participate on the election committee. And that would generally be the presiding officer from our agency, but I'll talk to you about that. So we're not eligible to run for a seat there.
Okay, I thought it was anybody from independent special district, but I stand corrected. And
I thought the same thing at first.
yeah, for the Alameda County Special Districts Association, Director Weed and I have been active for a dozen years. I do not want to serve on that board. I'm already representing the Alameda County Special Districts Association along with Director Weed on the Alameda County Countywide Oversight Board. And that's enough responsibility for at least me. If John wants to go for something else, that's up to him.
Let me try this one right now, which is the JPIA. They do have some conferences with the state conference of California Special Districts, but I would note that every speaker is a motivational speaker, and there's pitifully little substance. So, thank you.
That completes my general manager's reports, just checking over my shoulder to make sure there's nothing else that has come up. So I think we can move on to director's comments or agenda item requests. It sounds like Director Weed and Sethy will be making reports on their CalDSal meeting attendance next month.
I'll leave it up to Director Vice President Gunther to adjourn the meeting when he's ready.
Okay, I will note that I've requested the consideration of including the Niles Canyon Aqueduct in the IRP. I've spoken with members of staff on that, because I believe it's an important alternative and secure and resilient water supply that would be to the benefit of the district. Thank you. I'll fit into tonight's conversation.
Okay. Further comments? Hearing none.
All right.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks very much, everybody.